Most have heard the old adage, the book was better. Many times it has some truth, sometimes it doesn't. But this truth hides a surprising wrinkle. Not all books come simply from people. Some are based on films, television, video games. And in those instances, is the book also better when it itself is derivative? Hello, this is Thomas Wrightson, and welcome to the 4th episode of my podcast, Author Talks, this current season anyway. Today, I decided to focus on a shorter theme, something people could digest, mostly because I picked up some novel adaptations of a radio series on a whim and ended up intrigued by the differences present in how each side portrayed the same story. There are actual non-fiction works that delve into this subject with a lot more academic thoroughness than I propose to, including Jean Bittin's Novelisation from Film to Novel, first published in English in 2018. I've left some links in the description you may find interesting, looking at different novelisation approaches analysed by different scholars at different times. For context, a novelisation is, as summed up on the lead of the subject's Wikipedia page, a derivative novel that adapts the story of a work created for some other medium, such as a film, TV series, stage play, comic book, or video game. I would also add radio play to that, but let's move on. They have been almost exclusively a commercial product, part of the multimedia adaptation landscape. At first glance, that doesn't lend itself to high art or quality, but as with any project, it's more about who writes it. Just as a pedestrian writer turns out pedestrian scripts on grand and amazing subjects, so a great writer can turn out great work on fairly scant material. The novelisations I find interesting are projects written either by the writers of the original product or in consultation with them. This allows for a greater degree of faithfulness to the original, obviously, but it also gives rise to an interesting question, though we should start with some of the more standard fare so we get an idea of what we're dealing with. My earliest encounters with the novelisation were a children's book based on Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which was written as diary entries from both Gromit and antagonist canine character Philip, and James Rollins's book adaptation of the 4th Indiana Jones movie, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. These were the definition of commercial products, very much written and published to ride the marketing wave and catch a few additional sales. From a writer's standpoint, they're not award-winning by any stretch, but they are interesting, especially Rollins's work, which even won an award. It expands on the story extensively with internal monologues from characters and additional little scenes which provide context to what in the film was barely or not explored. I kinda enjoyed it, and I remember it fondly because it made the movie better on a rewatch. I still don't like the movie that much, but it's something. This variation in content from the film or video game or whatever parent project doesn't just come from given leeway to add more detail, but it can come from the fact that these books were often released close to their parent projects. They were written while the film was in production, and as with any media project, films are subject to change. An example of this is the novelisation of Ridley Scott's Alien by Alan Dean Foster. Based on the shooting script of the film, it features a number of altered events compared to the final release, such as an encounter between Parker and the alien, which is referenced but never seen in the film, and additional internal character and world building. It's not the best book you'll ever read, but it's a fun time. The novelisation has benefits when it comes to these kinds of editions. For one, there is no effects budget to consider. A notable instance of this was the novelisation of Dragonheart by the film's writer Charles Edward Pogue. Executive interference, budget limitations and creative differences meant the film wasn't true to Pogue's vision, so his novelisation was basically his original intent. It's darker, more detailed, features stuff that couldn't be done with the effects budget of the time, and has been called superior to the film by some. Transplant the basic sentiments and you'll have a similar story of tonal changes plus expanded narrative on many different novelisation projects. Indeed, script rewrites and executive meddling not impacting novel projects makes these more often than not intriguing curiosities to fans and connoisseurs. Hard luck on us amateurs, since they rapidly sell out and become overpriced collector's items in no time. Now for something a bit more detailed, and something that is actually very available today. Heard of Paul Temple? If you've any radio experience, almost certainly yes, since he was the undisputed detective king of the airwaves from 1938 to 1968. His creator and writer, Francis Durbridge, co-wrote or wrote nearly 20 books about the character, either novelizations of the original radio productions or original stories. Looking at them, there is a notable tonal and content difference between the two versions of each story. For a relatively easy example, let's look at Paul Temple Intervenes, originally a radio series from 1942 and novelised 2 years later. Both stories see the titular novelist and private detective pulled into Scotland Yard's investigation of a criminal known as the Marquis. And here's where the differences begin. I'll try and dance around major spoilers, but in the original serial, the Marquis is a fairly nebulous criminal figure, someone best summed up as a blackmailer and murderer. In the book, it's much more clearly shown that he is a new crime boss, someone gaining control of London's wartime underworld. Durbridge also expands and names one of the previously nameless henchmen into a character who ties into this broader approach. There's also a tonal difference in how some aspects of the story are handled. While not exactly sunshine and rainbows, the radio version could be quite coy about violence and background details on certain characters. Here, it's all laid bare. If someone was beaten to death, you get a description of the person in their injured condition, not just a simple, "he's been beaten up, poor devil," which you'll find very frequently in the radio version. There are more examples from across Durbridge's books, with darker tones, increased violence, and a clear sense that these are real crimes impacting people rather than light mysteries to solve. While glossed over in most of the radio versions, in the books there are real and tangible consequences for some of the people involved, from destroyed livelihoods to life-changing injuries and scars. We also have a different kind of relationship between Paul and his wife Steve, still loving and something of a partnership, with a strange edge in places. Durbridge's unfiltered voice turns Paul Temple Intervenes from a Golden Age style story into something more akin to a lighter toned noir. Speaking of radio to novel transitions, we can't not talk about Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. While it started as a 2-season radio show which ran from 1978 to 1980, an enduring form was the book series he created, where he very much went in his own direction. This 5-book series, humorously dubbed a trilogy in 5 parts, starts off fairly faithful to the radio series before veering off in its own direction. Without the need to think of other factors, such as actors and sound effects and runtime, Adams went wild. He also ended it on a far bleaker note than the original series, something he later regretted, although he never got the chance to write a 6th entry due to his untimely death in 2001. As an example of these changes, the events of the original radio production are effectively spread across the first 2 books in the series, with some additional bits and pieces put in to cover the gaps and create more jokey scenarios. Part of this was due to the first book needing to be finished right now, and Adams was procrastinating, so his publishers needed to act, but it still sort of works. If you know the radio series, you can tell where the joins are, but it's also got an increasingly unique voice. Of course, Adams also expanded Hitchhikers in a number of other directions, from television to video games to a posthumously produced movie, but the books are likely what has ingrained in a lot of people's consciousness, being translated into at least 30 languages and selling millions of copies worldwide. They can be considered definitive, which is certainly funny and interesting considering they were essentially novelizations. To me, the radio series is definitive because I experienced it first, and I see the novels as derivative. That attitude will likely change depending on what you experienced first. Hitchhiker isn't the only television series to get notable novelization projects. Pretty much every popular television series has one, but the ones I remember are from the Doctor Who series. The classic one from the last century, that is, not the new one. Novelizations of these stories started relatively early, and for certain incomplete or lost serials have become a valid substitute for fans. The original serial writers often wrote the novelizations themselves, creating a compelling new canon. To cite a few examples, Robot has some further character introspection to complement its genuinely moving story, Fury from the Deep weighs its departmental infighting alongside its sea-bound threat, and there are a lot of additional character elements in the print version of Pyramids of Mars. Does this make them great masterworks? Well, usually not, mostly because Doctor Who is only rarely a masterwork, but they're worth checking out if possible. Now we reach game novelizations, which... oh boy. They can be very awkward because of how games are structured, especially since it can be difficult at a glance to distinguish novelizations from expanded media. Most books related to Square Enix products, for example, aren't adaptations of existing stories, but additional stories or interquels or follow-ups. These range from unexpected bestsellers like the early Halo novels, through entertaining and informative, such as practically every addition to the Drakengard and Nier canon, to controversial, like Final Fantasy XV Dawn of the Future and Final Fantasy X 2.5 Ain no Daisho. But this is about novelizations, and I happen to have one on my shelves, that being Iko, Castle in the Mist by Miyuki Miyabe. This book also serves as an interesting case study, as it's a novel adapting a game which has little to no direct storytelling. Fumito Ueda's approach of design by subtraction and focus on a simple storyline leaves scant bones for adaptation, but Miyabe was allowed to try. She stated in the book's foreword that it wasn't going to be a walkthrough, not only because she shifted many game elements around, but because she expanded greatly on events. And expand she did, as she was given free rein by the game's creators. I enjoyed this book, even if it dragged at times, and it serves as a great case study for how a game can be adapted into novel form without reading like a strategy guide. The secret? Let the author have their head. Of course, not all novelizations can be praised as standing out like this. For one, there's the novelisation of 1933's King Kong by Delos Loveless, which was written up and published 2 months before the film's release and is very much one of those commercial products because it's basically the film, and the film in some aspects hasn't aged. Another that's basically the film, barring a wildly different ending, is a novelisation of the 2006 movie Siren by Yoshihiko Shindo, based on the J-horror movie inspired by the video game series of the same name. Actually, survival horror is quite the genre for receiving print adaptations and novelizations, with Resident Evil, Dead Space, Fatal Frame and Silent Hill all getting the treatment. I think the developers were trying to achieve media translation squared. And this brings me back round to the fact that these projects were principally commercial, not artistic. Even projects like those from Adams and Durbridge were motivated by commercial interest. Although since this is an adaptation to book rather than from book to another medium, it's caught in an odd cultural middle ground. Books have an intrinsic and historic value, in quotes, and as Carmen Sala says in the essay on the Hitchhiker's adaptation, when studying an adapted work, it is important to take into consideration the intermedial aspects of the work in question. What happens to a story when it is translated from one media to another? Which senses does the media form focus on, and how does it affect the story? There is also the matter of how much the media format matters when it comes to success and status. Different types of media have different status in the academic and commercial world. Would an adaptation suffer from that status if it was adapted from a higher ranked media to a lower? This feeds back into an issue raised in Merat Somaya's essay that novelizations are seen as a kind of lesser art form within novel writing. Anyone who has actually written novelizations or spin-off novel projects in general will likely be fuming at this. Writing is writing and requires a definite skill set and the ability to deliver something that takes what is a completely different format and make it marketable in a different media. So is there anything that actively causes the stigma to appear? Yes, there's no mystery here, as it loops back around to the commercial origins of the subgenre. Quoting from Somaya, "To understand the genesis of novelization and its initial establishment, it is crucial to delve into its origins. Notably, novelizations often emerged concurrently with film production, blurring the lines between their chronological precedents. In some instances, writing of novelizations commenced even before film production, underscoring their close ties to screenplays or excerpts thereof. This early relationship between novelizations and films led to novelizations serving as cinematic previews, sometimes preceding the actual release of the films. These early novelizations, driven primarily by commercial motives, diverged from their cinematic counterparts, creating a unique literary experience that preceded the visual rendition. This commercial aspect of novelization not only allowed audiences to experience a film before its official release, but also catered to those seeking additional insights and narrative expositions beyond the cinematic experience." This commercial angle has persisted throughout the genre's existence and consequently has moulded this idea in people's minds, that the novelization is just another piece of merchandise, an extension of those themed popcorn tubs or Lego sets that are promoting this latest blockbuster entry. Why should we care? And often we don't, especially as the genre is often aimed at a younger audience, which adds to its own level of snobbish stigmatization. But I say to that, yeah, so what? People find enjoyment in anything, as evidenced by the success of Barbara Cartland back in the day, and there can be plenty of literary merit in a commercial product. I mean, the great novels of literature started out as commercial products. And that's it. Sorry if this episode was a bit short, but it felt like a topic I shouldn't be stretching beyond its due date. Thank you for listening, and if you'd like to support me, then do subscribe for more content of various kinds, both this and stuff about video games, and check out links in the description to my latest novel and to my website where you'll find updates aplenty. My next novel, The Murderer's Lament, is eyeing a release later in 2026, and is a detective mystery where two very different people team up to solve a devious crime against the backdrop of high-stakes interplanetary politics. I'm hoping to have more information for you in the future about that, so until next time, see ya! And James Rollins's book adaptation of the fourth and James Rollins's fourth okay, I'm tired. I'm tired and I'm getting over a cold. But it can come from the fact that these books were often released close to that of the film. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Why did I write that? Because it doesn't make sense. Why did I write that? Why? Oh, I hate doing this kind of thing when I'm gooey. Yeah, when you got a schedule that you want to follow, it's a real pain sometimes. Hitchhiker isn't the only television series to get notable novelisation projects. Pretty much every popular television... Ah, damn it! Oh, it'll be a miracle if this episode turns out anything other than me sounding very ill. Now we skipped a whole paragraph there. Hitchhiker isn't the only television series to get notable novelisation projects. Pretty much every popular television... Blah, 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 blah. Now my mouth's going numb. Blah, blah. Focus, Tom. Focus on your pronunciation, your elocution, your textualization. And this brings me back round to the fact that these projects were principally commercial, not artistic. Not again. That's the second or third time I've burped during this recording. This feeds back into an issue raised in Merad Someya's essay on... This feeds back into an issue raised in Merad Someya's issue that novelizations are seen as kind of a... Oh, God, I'm tired. Try this again. An extension to those popcorn... Burp again.